Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm a child psychiatrist, parent coach, and I'm also a mum. And today I'm talking about mismatch. Now, this is not something that parents directly ask me about because usually, if this is happening, they're not always aware that this is happening. What usually happens is parents bring me some other difficulties, maybe behavior difficulties, maybe things like anxieties and worries. And actually, when I talk to them about what's going on, we understand that there is a little bit of a mismatch between what the parent is doing and what the child is needing, and it's manifesting itself in some sort of way. And there's different ways in which it can come about. And this is exactly what I'll be talking about in this video. So if you're wondering about a difficult behavior or moodiness or some kind of emotional difficulty, it's really worth watching because it might be that you'll find there's a little bit of a mismatch between what you're doing, what your child needs, and actually correcting that may help correct what's going on. And if you want something a little bit more specific, please do come and join the community group. You can ask more specific questions there, which is really, really fantastic, especially in the lives. I can take a little bit longer to talk about them. Of course, if you want something even more specific, I'd love to do individual coaching so we can really home in on any kind of difficulties. And of course, do join my email list. I've now got some extra free videos that you get as part of being on my email list. And of course, you'll also get the videos and the blog articles every week sent to you, so you'll know exactly what's happening and you won't miss anything. So let's talk a bit about mismatch. So what I mean by that is between what a parent maybe thinks is a good idea or does or is just naturally what happens, and between what the child needs. So I'm going to give examples. I'm going to go through the four sort of domains of the four essentials and give a few examples for each one that will illustrate them. So for things like the safe base, for example, you might have quite a busy house. Might be lots of kids, you might have a lot of relatives coming in and out, might just be lots going on, you might have building works, and just might be a very busy, noisy environment. Whereas you may have a child that has a very specific sensory need, who needs things to be quiet, who needs things to be slow and predictable. And that kind of mismatch can really create difficulties. The reverse can happen as well. So if you have a child that loves to be on the go, is really lively, really wants to have lots of people around, but actually the rest of the family are introverts who really like to be quiet, have quiet space, not have a lot of visitors, you might again sort of get understimulation for that child, and they might start to feel a bit down or worried, and or even kind of act out because actually it's just difficult for them to not have the stimulation they need. Another way that safe, in terms of safe base, another kind of example is about how we talk about emotions. So you might have a child who is really just someone who experiences emotions a lot, likes to talk about them. Maybe they are just kind of quite acute for them because we all do experience emotions differently. It's not the same for everyone. But they might be in a family where people don't really talk about emotions, or perhaps everyone is really quite steady and they don't really get massive ups and downs. So there's not really a need to talk about emotions. And again, they might just find themselves feeling that they're not able to talk, or people don't really understand them. Just learn that over a period of time as they're growing up, that emotions just aren't a thing that you talk about. But that's just because they're slightly different people in the family who do things differently. And again, it might be the other way around, might have really, really emotional family members or a parent who's really emotional, always really happy to talk, and a child who's kind of much more steady and really does not need to be doing that. I think the worst scenario comes when it's the child who's emotional and the rest of the family or the parents, maybe that's just not the thing that they do, because I think that makes it much harder for them to really be open and let people know what's going on for them, which could lead to all kinds of things, letting emotions out in different ways through things like self-harming or taking drugs or something else. So it is just, and it's not anyone's fault, it's just that's the way things happen, or that's the personalities that people have. But it is something you can do something about, because actually if you notice that, you can say, okay, well, I don't usually talk about emotions, but maybe I need to. Maybe we just all need to as a family. And even if it's all a bit alien to us, it doesn't mean that we don't talk about it and don't make a point of it being okay to do that. In terms of sensitivity, there's a couple of mismatches that I'm going to give as examples. So maybe, you're someone who just gets on and you really don't like to make a big deal out of things. It's just not how you do things. Everything is a small deal, everything can be overcome, and you're someone who's really positive, in overcoming challenges. But you might have a child who really requires that empathy in order to move to the next step. And it's just the way that some people are. They just need to know that they are really understood, that things, you understand how bad things are for them, and then they can move on. Whereas for some people, they don't need that. In fact, they do very well with not kind of digging, too deeply into it. And if there is just that mismatch, you might really kind of, in a very well meaning way, be saying, oh, don't worry about that. It's not a big thing. Let's just get on with this. But your child might really need that validation. And that's actually the thing that allows them to move on. And again, that's just a mismatch of the way that things are done. It might be the other way around. You might have a child who actually is very happy not going, into great depth about how things are for them. And they're kind of very forward looking and active and proactive and they just want to get on. You might be someone who's quite an emotional person. You might feel it's really important to look into all the feelings and to really kind of question about the depths of what has been happening. And for your child, that just might not be the way they work, and it might not be particularly useful or kind of lead anywhere. It might be that for you, it really helps you understand things and, really helps you to feel okay about something difficult that's happened. But that's not necessarily true for your child. Everyone is different, and for them, that kind of in-depth looking into things just might actually be a bit overwhelming and a bit unnecessary, and might lead them to kind of get, a little bit more, depressed or anxious when actually they would have been able to get on with things if they'd sort of done it their way. So again, just noticing whether you're feeling that friction, if you're really trying to ask lots of questions and your child is going, what's the big deal? Can we move on from this now? It might be that's absolutely okay for them, might just not need that in-depth questioning. In terms of boundaries and frameworks, you might be a parent who is really keen that kids are free and relaxed and things are just, as they come, and you really do not want things to be strict and rigid. Maybe that's just kind of what your personal preference is. Maybe you're a person who's like that. Maybe you're just someone who is a little bit more free flowing, really doesn't need routines and boundaries, and you maybe think that's a good thing because it allows for lots of play, creativity, and spontaneity. But you might have a child who really does not thrive in that. You might have a child who really thrives with routines or knowing kind of what's happening or having a really good understanding of where they stand with things or what is and isn't okay to do. It's especially true, if your child is maybe on the autistic spectrum, maybe they even have a diagnosis, but they don't have to. Some people just prefer that as a personality trait rather than it being part of any kind of diagnosis. And not knowing, not having the routines can be extremely stressful for them and lead to all kinds of anxieties and worries and just sort of leave them in a constantly anxious state. And you might be wanting to support them to be more free flowing, but I think it is different. I think the capacity to just serve things as they come is really varied in people. And some people is just not the way they function and it doesn't really help them. Could, of course, be the other way around. You could be someone who's really routined. You like to have quite strict boundaries, maybe. Maybe you're not sure about children becoming more and more independent, but you have a child who functions really well in a much more chaotic environment, who really thrives on that, who perhaps is more able to be creative in that kind of environment, or that's something that they really enjoy doing. And again, letting go of your need for the predictability and the rigidity can be really tough for them. They can really feel very hemmed in, and that might lead to them doing things that they don't tell you about, and experimenting with things they don't tell you about because they're really worried that you're just not going to let them do stuff. So it can break the trust between you, and it could just be that they are just temperamentally a different person from you, and it is really hard to work on that, I think. But again, it's something that you can make even small changes in if that's how it is. And if you really recognise that to be the case, it's okay to make those changes. In terms of nurture, I think how people feel nurtured is so varied. So some people feel very nurtured by a lovely chat, and maybe you're someone who's a real talker and feels that, good chats are just a very nurturing experience. You might have a child who's just not like that, who just doesn't get on with talking, chatting, just doesn't do anything for them. They might prefer to be nurtured in a more active way or in a more physical way. Doing an activity side by side that's creative might feel nurturing for them. but actually talking about their feelings really might not do, or just being sedentary, might just not be something that they do find particularly nurturing, whereas actually doing something very active might be much more nurturing for them. The other thing that might be different is that, you might feel that family time together is what's really nurturing, but they might really thrive on their time alone and find that really nurturing, find that really gives them time to sort of rest, recuperate, play in their own way, create in their own way. And it can be really difficult if you don't notice how important that is for them, or maybe feel that that's not as important as having time together. Of course, having time together is really important, but it might be that the balance is just slightly skewed towards what you feel is right rather than towards what they actually need. And it might be that it just needs a bit of a rebalance. Maybe they just need to get a bit more time to themselves, a bit less time with the family, but that works all right for them. Of course, can be absolutely the other way around. It could be that you nurture yourself by doing loads of things on your own that are not related to your family, and actually you're someone who really thrives on that. But actually, they're a person who really needs time with their loved ones, and that can be a really difficult mismatch, because your child can end up feeling like you're really not interested in what's going on for them, whereas you need the time alone in order to feel okay yourself. And finding a fine balance between you getting that time and them still getting some time with you and you being able to enjoy that is really important, very individual process. I think that balance is going to be different for everyone. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of food for thought. Maybe you've listened to that and you've thought, oh yeah, I think there is a bit of a mismatch between this and this, and maybe this is leading to some anxieties or some other difficulties that you're having. And of course, I think it's such a personal thing to families. It's really difficult to give lots of generalizations, but these are some of the things that I have seen in clinical practice. If you do want some more sort of personal advice, please do get in touch. Really love to hear from people and try and help them. And of course, do join the community where you can also ask questions. Hopefully, I will see you soon.